Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Babbling Irons match preview with myself, Mike, and Sloth today. West Ham versus Fulham. Graham Potter's first home game in charge, first Premier League game in charge in what is going to be an interesting next couple of weeks as well. Not just on the pitch, but off the pitch as well, with the injuries we've got to face, with the transfer rumours that are going to be coming around. But this is going to be focusing on the preview itself for the Fulham game and how we can maybe try and get a win in Graham Potter's first home game in charge in the Premier League. So if you do enjoy, leave a like, subscribe. And yeah, before we get into it, lads, just a little bit of an overview of the stats so far this season for both teams. So looking at it here, we can see Fulham are 7 points better off with 30 to our 23. They've scored 6 more goals than us with 30 compared to our 24. We've leaked a lot more goals, 39 compared to their 27. And we are currently sitting in 14th while they are in the top half in 9th. And when we look at the expected stats, it's even better for Fulham, even worse for West Ham. So we are expected to have 21.10 points compared to Fulham's 32.82. The XG is a little bit higher than ours, and our expected goals conceded is a lot higher than theirs. 41.98 in the Premier League for West Ham so far this season, which I believe is the fourth worst in the division. And yeah, Fulham's is pretty good at 25.35. And yeah, you can see the expected position difference there. West Ham should be in 15th, theoretically, and Fulham should actually be a few places above where they currently are, and should be in 6th. So quite a different contrast in the two teams. Before we get onto West Ham, which is going to be more of the bulk of the analysis, what have you guys made of Fulham so far this season under Marco Silva? It's obviously a manager that David Sullivan has come out and said that he likes, but has quite a big compensation package. I think he was also linked with a job before Potter took it. So how impressed have you been with Marco Silva and Fulham so far this season?
Go on, Sloth. You go
on. I think Fulham have exceeded expectations this season. They've really flattered to deceive in some parts, though, and I think that is something that West Ham really need to try and exploit, because as much as Raul Jimenez always seems to score against us, they haven't ever really replaced Mitrovic and got on that key figure up top. And they've had a lot of goals spread across the side, people like Harry Wilson, Alex Iwobi. Muniz hasn't quite hit the same heights that he showed at the last end of the season. So I think that when you look at them as an attacking threat, they have lots and lots of assets, but they're kind of like us. They don't have a focal point or someone who you can rely on to score goals. And though we spoke about in the preview for the game earlier in the season where they've switched to this double pivot instead of having Palhinha there, I think that it's a case of just finding that balance for them. And when they find a goal scorer, that's when they'll kick on and really sort of cement their European challenge. And yeah, I think the management from Marco Silva has been very solid. They are, week away from home, and that's something that I think we'll be quietly confident with, or hoping they repeat again. But other than that, I think really impressed with them this season. The transfer window they had was excellent, and the players they've signed have really stepped up to the plate.
Yeah, what about from your perspective, Mike? They've got a few players, obviously Issa Diop, former West Ham player at the back, but one of the standouts for Fulham this season has been Robinson at left back. I think he's excelled for them both from an offensive perspective and also defensively. I think Marco Silva's been really high in praise for him this season and how he's started to develop as well. So how impressed have you been with him this season? And is there anyone else in that Fulham squad that's impressed you so far?
Yeah, I think with Fulham, they're a really well organised team. Silva has got them playing some good stuff. Yeah, like you know what? To be honest, I'm not really that bothered about Fulham. If I'm being completely honest, but they do have some good players like Emil Smith-Rowe. Traore is always going to be a problem because he's an absolute unit and he's got nothing but blistering pace. So that's going to be a very interesting dynamic for us to deal with, because it's most likely to probably going to be Ollie Scholes, which means it's going to be an incredible test for the young lad to go up against Traore. That's probably where the main danger is for us, because we're going to have someone incredibly inexperienced going up alongside a player who admittedly has inconsistent output, but he will most likely, from a Fulham point of view, be absolutely salivating at the opportunity and the idea of going after essentially a young player with 3 games to his name. So it's going to be an interesting watch. I think that is probably the one thing I'm more concerned about because of the inexperience we're going to have on that left hand side, and it does mean that the likes of Kilman's probably going to come over and do a lot of covering. So from that perspective, it's probably going to open up quite a few avenues for Fulham really to look to exploit us, and players like Smith Rowe flourish in those kind of pockets of space and so on. And as Slav said, Raul Jimenez always seems to find a goal against us, so it's almost feels a bit predestined, doesn't it? that kind of combination, Traore and maybe Jimenez, is probably going to put us to the sword.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And let's just kind of recap on Fulham so far again this season in a bit more detail. So they have the 11th best offensive record in the Premier League with 30 goals scored, and their 10th for best expected offensive record. They have the 9th strongest defensive record in the Premier League. They rank 6th, as I already mentioned, for expected points. They're averaging around 1.5 goals per game with an XG of 1.63. They're averaging 1.35 goals conceded per game with an expected goals against of 1.28. And their average possession is just above 50% at 51.72% in the Premier League so far. So, yeah, as you mentioned, Slough, it's not going to be an easy game, despite Fulham's, away form hasn't been great. Fulham have only lost 1 game since November, but they have had a lot of draws in that run as well. And I think that's where maybe some of their fans have been a little bit frustrated, not converting those into wins. Recently they've had a couple of draws at home to the likes of Bournemouth, to Ipswich as well. I know they just went through in the FA Cup in midweek, so they'll be full of confidence there. But it's a difficult challenge. And obviously, Graham Potter's now come in. We've seen Graham Potter for 1 game, Slough, in that Aston Villa defeat in the FA Cup. How does he set this up? Because Fulcrook's going to be injured. Somerville's going to be injured. How does Graham Potter approach this for his first Premier League home game in charge?
Well, I watched the press conference earlier today, and first of all, I've just got to say how nice and refreshing it is to see a manager who actually appears excited about the task and, was bouncing off the reporters. There's a bit of rapport there, and he was very precise with how he worded things about Fulcrook in particular, and the need for a striker. And I think in terms of what we should probably look to do, I just think Danny Ings is not up to the Premier League standard anymore. And look, I don't like appearing to always single him out or be too hard on him, but he was absolutely useless against Aston Villa. And I think it's a case of we just need to now look at how we move forward without him. And if the worst case scenario does happen and we pick up some more injuries, then I would not even consider him then. It's genuinely got to the point where I think we're probably going to have to play Lucas Paqueta up top and let him try and link up with the attackers around him, utilise the pace that we do have. But I think when I was listening to Potter and listening to how, his insight into the performance against Aston Villa, it was very much something that we were talking about, where it was lots of positives to take away, but it's very clear that there are issues that need to be addressed. And whether that's a case of actually sticking into a system and stepping back from this aimless pressing that has been pushed into the players for this season, that's going to take a bit of time to reorganize. And I think that's what we've got to look to try and address against Fulham. If we can do that, then I think we can, we should be confident. But that's the challenge.
Yeah, agreed. I think from a personnel perspective, it'll be interesting to see how Potter does line up with this. He's pretty limited with who he can pick, but again, I think Danny Ings is probably one of the ones in contention to start. Whether he goes with Danny Ings or pushes someone like Kudus or Paqueta further forwards and brings in Soler into the midfield, that remains to be seen. But in terms of Fulham as well, like they've started the season in kind of a 4-3-3 with Lukic at the base, and then like Pereira and Smith Rowe as the two number 10s or two number 8s. In the last few weeks, they have started to adjust a little bit. So they've played a back three. They've played a slightly different back four. So it's been quite a few different changes from Marco Silva. I think we'd expect him to go back to this kind of 4-3-3 that we can see here. And on the left-hand side as well, we can have a look and see West Ham's potential lineup, with Kilman, Mavropanos, Kufau at the back, Wan-Bissaka and Scarles as the wing-backs, Souček and Alvarez in midfield, as we saw against Aston Villa. Paqueta and Kudus as the number 10s and Ings up top. But as you were mentioning, Sloth, it could well be that Paqueta or Kudus go to striker and then someone like Carlos Soler comes into that midfield. Is that something you would both want to see without, I guess the question is, should we not have Danny Ings starting as a first point?
Well, I think that for me, it's imperative that Ings doesn't start. And I know that sounds harsh, but as we saw against Fulham in the away game, it's a case of he tends to have the best impact off the bench and late on into games. And I think what we really need to think about with Fulham is their pace that they possess. You know, even just looking at Robinson at the back, he's another really pacey player who can link up with the attack well, but isn't afraid to really overlap his winger and give him an option. And you know, it's these fast technical players that we need to plan against. And I just think that Ings is going to be completely out of his depth against someone like Bassi, who will just physically bully him. We know Issa Diop can struggle at times when it comes to defending, but I think when you are that big and possess that pace, it will be a case of, you know, not necessarily having to worry about Danny Ings. And I know that sounds quite harsh, like very dismissive, but anyone who watched that game against Aston Villa, I don't think would have been inspired.
Agreed. Yeah, it was a really poor performance from Danny Ings, and yeah, this isn't an easy test for Graham Potter. I think he maybe would have preferred an easier fixture, although no Premier League game really is that easy anymore. But you know, Fulham have been a really well-structured, well-drilled team. Marco Silva's obviously been there for a few seasons. So they know how they want to play, and the players kind of have already bought into that. Graham Potter's at the completely other end of it, where, as you mentioned, still trying to get the players up to speed with how he wants to play. As you mentioned in his press conference, he mentioned about the players being quite receptive to his new ideas and encouraged by it, which is also a positive sign. But whether they can execute it is a different question. Whether they have the ability to play in certain positions is also another question. I think for me, we at the moment, because we're kind of playing Alvarez and Souček as the two defensive midfielders in this system, it just limits what we can do through the lines, because we all know that Graham Potter will want technical players in that position that are comfortable under pressure and comfortable in possession. I think Alvarez is to an extent, but he's just too slow. But Souček, we know, can't play that position. Is that going to be a key area to pitch on Saturday, on Tuesday, Mike, for the game against Fulham?
Yeah, progression was one of the things that we kind of struggled with against Villa. What we did quite well in those early stages is we was able to play a bit direct as well. And because we essentially had 4 players in advance, we managed to kind of create that little triangle around Fulkrug, where we tended to have Paqueta coming inside and obviously having Kudus playing close, that we could kind of bypass that midfield and play a little bit more direct, which meant that we could kind of negate at times that need to kind of play through. You say Alvarez, to a point, can kind of play those balls between the lines. However, he's not as proficient as maybe Soler. So I think if we're in a game where we're going to be expected to try and be the aggressor and be the team to try and go and break them down, I think Fulham will turn up and say, try and break us down. We'll hit you in transition. We know that's been your major weakness all season. And you're not really scoring. And especially with our problems, I would be inclined, if I was Silva, to go, actually, we probably don't need to go for them. We can just sit in. We can defend our area, be compact, be tight, and then we'll hit them in transition, and that's where we'll cause them problems. So I do think we will struggle if we got both Alvarez and Souček there. Problem is, Souček is now our captain, de facto captain, whilst Bowen is out injured. So is he likely to be dropped? No, not likely, and arguably doesn't deserve to be dropped this season. So then you're going to have to go, well, of those two, probably if we're going to drop one of them, Alvarez is the one, or because of our defensive problems, maybe you drop Alvarez into defence. Allow him to have us to have a player that can play out of defence, play in the centre of the three. Maybe have. I do not think in any way, shape, or form you can have Soufa at right centre back position. It is just asking for problems because he plays that right centre back position as if he's a right back, which is inanely frustrating and suicidal. So I feel what we need to do in that midfield is drop him Alvarez back into defence because of our defensive shortage. What a surprise. We have a shortage in defence now as well, especially if we can play this kind of back three formation. And bring Soler in, because then at least you have a player who is able to make those passes between the lines. Ask Souček to be kind of more defensive in many aspects in terms of when we're in possession, especially in kind of our own half. Sit in there and just be a player that we can maybe pass it into, but obviously looking for Soler to kind of make that progression. And then as soon as we get to the halfway line, then, Soler's the one that drops in and Souček is the one who goes forward, because Souček is the one who's most likely to get a goal. And as we saw in the lovely pass he made with his left foot in the other game, which is completely escaping when he got the assist, he can have that ability to, again, be effective in the area. So I personally would do it that way, especially if we're playing a back three, because I kind of put it out on our Twitter where someone put a lineup out and saying about, well, Casey playing as a centre back. I've got no issues with Casey playing a centre back, but only if it's in a back four. He's playing in a back three and as the kind of the centre point on that. For me, that's a very dangerous thing to do, because I look at a back three as the true centre back within that three being the linchpin, the person who orchestrates what that defence does. And that's a hell of a lot of responsibility to put on a 19-year-old kid who has made one substitute appearance in the Premier League. I think that's something a bit too much to put on him. Again, if he was moving to either the left-hand side or the right-hand side of that defence, I can understand it, but you can't put him as a linchpin. And I think that's our bigger problem. If we don't have Mavropanos, we don't have Todibo, we basically only have Kilman as a fit defender.
I'm hoping that Mavropanos will be fit. I think Potter alluded to the fact that he's back in training and he should be okay. So we know Mavropanos' performance haven't been great this season anyway, so it's not like some amazing news. But yeah, I get your point, Mike. It's frustrating, and yeah, Kufau in that right centre back position in that second half against Aston Villa just completely strayed out of position, really, really poor on numerous occasions, and arguably cost us that second goal in the FA Cup. But all things considered, are we confident that we can get a result from this game for Graham Potter's first home Premier League game in charge? What's your score predictions, lads?
Go on, Slav.
I think we have a decent chance. I think if the stars align and if we can put out the sort of formation that we've alluded to, I think Paqueta in that false nine would be a good asset, because it relieves any of the sort of defensive frailties or ambitious loss of possession, is probably the best way to put it, that he goes for every game. I think it really eases that importance. And if we can set up properly, I think we can snatch a result, especially at home. The atmosphere is going to be really good. I'm going to go for 2-1 win. And I know that's ambitious, but I think we could probably just about scrape it.
Mike?
Just because of all the injuries and the uncertainty as to how and who is going to line up. I can't say, even scraping it as a win. I think at best a draw, but I fear it will be a defeat because it's such a hodgepodge of players that we're having to put together in a system that we've not really had much time on. Like, I pretty much the next 2-3 games, in all honesty, I don't hold out great hope, mainly because there's a lot of changes that need to be made, not just from a style point of view, but from a mentality point of view within the players as well. And they need confidence. What I am probably more excited about in this game rather than the results, because I'm kind of in some ways looking at it as a mini preseason. I know it sounds mental because we're in the middle of a season, but in the state that we are and the point that we are, I'm probably more excited about maybe seeing the likes of Skulls embedded, maybe seeing if Orford is brought into that midfield and seeing what he can offer. If Casey does play, how does he step up against a very good team in Fulham? And in general, just seeing how the players' mentality, how they're going to kind of come together as a team. Because again, someone like Lewis Gilham has been on the sidelines really the entire season. This is now his chance. So whilst I'm concerned about all the injuries, and I think that's why we're probably going to struggle over the next couple of games, it does open a lot of opportunities for other players to make a claim. Unfortunately, like Sloth said, I don't think Danny Ings is going to be one of those making a claim. But that's the one thing that I am more looking forward to than maybe the game and the result, is that incorporation of maybe players that have been a bit more on the peripheral, and maybe some young players finally getting a chance.
Yeah, no, I do agree. I think it'll be difficult for us to win this game just because as well, like even if Potter had been in charge for a few months and we were looking good, the injuries we've got are really key injuries. And it's, it's taken a massive dent into what you would consider as our strongest 11. So I can see it being a draw. I could see it being quite low scoring, maybe a 1-1 or even a 0-0. I'll go 1-1, so at least we get to see a goal. But yeah, as you say, I think Potter needs time. We need to take circumstance into account, and hopefully we do. As you say, it's going to be hopefully a good atmosphere with the new manager in there, and under the lights of the bowl should be an intimidating place for Fulham to go. But yeah, let us know down below in the comments, what are your score predictions for the game? Do you see it being a successful start for Graham Potter in the Premier League for West Ham, or do you think we are going to fall short and either draw or lose to a very decent Fulham side that have been very good this season? So yeah, let us know down below in the comments. Leave a like on the video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to the channel for more content. And lads, until the next one.
Come on, you eyes.